And then the next thing they do is march. And again, I'm moving rapidly through a real war that took place. And they end up settling on the opposing ends of a field, which is now what becomes the famous battle of, some people call it Azincourt or Agincourt. And the French, they got more people. I mean, it's in France. So they've got more people, substantially more people. And there's a bunch of different, in the books I've read, there's varying numbers, but they definitely had substantially more people. And Henry, he's talking to some of his leadership, his subordinate commanders, and then they all kind of walk off the stage, and he's left there, and he starts talking a little bit about the burden of command and some thoughts on leadership, which I found very familiar. So he says, upon the king, let us our lives, our souls, our debts, our careful wives, our children, and our sins lay on the king. We must bear all. So he knows that the king is responsible for everything. Got to take ownership of everything. Mm-hmm. And he kind of talks about this idea that the king is, it's the expression of it's lonely at the top. He's about to get into that in whatever it was, 1599. O ceremony, show me but thy worth. What is thy soul of adoration? Art thou aught else but place, degree, and form? So he's saying, like, what is all this junk? Besides just social rank and etiquette, what real meaning does it have? Creating awe and fear in other men, wherein thou art less happy being feared than they in fearing? So he's saying, look, like, these people are scared of me. I'm actually less happy than they are. They're afraid of me, but I'm less happy because I'm the guy that's scaring them. I am a king that find thee, and I know 'tis not the balm, the scepter, and the ball, the sword, the mace, the crown imperial, the intertissued robe of gold and pearl, the farced title running for the king, the throne he sits on, nor the tide of pomp that beats upon the high shore of this world. So he goes through all the kind of stereotypical things that make you a king. The clothes, the scepter, the crown, all those things. No, not all these, thrice gorgeous ceremony, not all these, laid in bed majestical. So not any of those beautiful things, expensive things, can sleep so soundly as the wretched slave. So it's the slave who, with a body filled and vacant mind, gets him to rest, crammed with distressful bread. So he's talking about this fact that the king doesn't get to rest. He doesn't get to sleep. When the slave goes home at night, he's going to eat the fed. And distressful, basically, that means that they made it themselves. They made it with their own hands. They actually get some satisfaction of making their food and eating it. He doesn't even get that satisfaction. His mind is constantly churning about the fate of the kingdom. And this is actually, interestingly, when I was in, I know we did a podcast here about Sri Lanka. And I talked about me being in Sri Lanka, and I tried to drag because again, I'd never been in combat. This is the mid-90s. And I tried to drag as much knowledge as I could out of the Sri Lankan guys, the Sri Lankan military, and the Sri Lankan Special Boat Service, and the Special Forces guys that we were working with, and they were unbelievably combat experienced veterans. But one of the guys that I befriended, who was an Army captain, and he was one of those guys who was a guy that was a good leader, but man, he felt exactly what this guy, what Henry V is talking about here. And I remember him saying, he's kind of just having a late night conversation with me, because like I said, I was constantly trying to garner information from these guys and learn from them. And because this guy had been a regular soldier. And then he had been promoted. He'd gone up the ranks. And he said, Jocko, when I was a soldier, meaning when he was just a grunt soldier, lower enlisted guy, he said, I knew I could survive anything. And I knew I could take care of myself. And it was actually kind of fun. And he said, now that I'm a company commander, because now he was actually a pretty senior guy, he said, it is the most stress and it is the most harrowing thing because I'm not worried about myself anymore, but I'm so worried about all these other guys. Mm-hmm. That's what the worry is. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I actually got to know that feeling myself. The leader gets no rest, and what Henry's talking about is that burden of command. And that's the same thing that Sri Lankan guy was talking about. And you hear me talking about it as well. Mm-hmm. That burden of command is heavy.